So I'm just going to take us through 3 case studies, really just to follow on the themes that Tom has already started to elaborate about, this whole idea of online and offline being integrated together. 2 of the case studies are going to be companies that were founded by people from the Wharton community, and also maybe some of you here in the room also invested in these companies as well. So as Tom said, I'm going to focus a little bit on e-commerce, and some of the ideas I'm going to look at here are ideas from a book that I just recently published, and it's kind of a twist on the old thing in retail. So since, we're here at the, I guess, a Wharton venue, I may have to cold call somebody. What's the most important thing in retail, Robert? The most important variable? Location. And the second most important? Location. And the third, okay, location, 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 right? So what's the twist here? The twist here is location is still important for e-commerce. Why is that? Location is important for e-commerce because the location that you live in is a very deliberate choice that says a lot about who you are. It says a lot about what your preferences are. And also the choice of location that you enter into also dictates what your offline opportunities are. So if you think about, the history of e-commerce, the first company started in the US, 1994, 21 years ago, was Amazon. The first customer of Amazon was not a guy who lived right next door to a Barnes & Noble. It was a guy who lived 50 miles away from the nearest very small bookstore, and so his offline opportunity was very, very limited, hence the online option became very, very attractive. So that's the sort of fundamental notion here, is that people's offline choices say something about who they are, but they also say a lot about what their offline options are, and therefore dictates online demand. So we're going to look at some spatial variation in online demand. The 3 case studies, everyone here, well, maybe I should ask, anyone here in the room heard about diapers.com? Okay, all right, very good. So diapers.com was founded by Mark Law and Vineet Bara, so we're going to go through a case study there. And that case study is going to be focused on very particular kinds of demand patterns that you always see with online companies. So whether I've looked at Warby Parker or Bonobos or Harry's or diapers.com, there's a very specific kind of spatial structure that we'll go through. The second case study is going to be a company, Crate & Barrel. I guess most of us know Crate & Barrel. And there's an important distinction here when we think about products that are sold online. This is a little bit of academic jargon. It was introduced by one of my advisors, Professor Rajiv Lal at Harvard University, and it's a very, very good distinction. He talks about the difference between products that have digital and non-digital attributes. Okay? So if, again, you think about the history of Amazon, what was the #1 product category sold through catalogs in 1994 when Amazon was founded? Any idea? And the clue, it was not books. Okay? So what was the #1 product category, you might imagine, sold for maybe 100 years through catalogs in the United States? Some of you might have even bought these kinds of products through catalogs. You're on the right track. So the #1 product category was actually clothing and apparel. Now, if I were Jeff Bezos, obviously I'm not in his league probably intellectually. He's a very clever fellow. He didn't just take the #1 product category in catalogs and throw it into the electronic catalog of the internet, because he realized clothing has what Rajiv would call non-digital attributes. Tactile things that people want to touch and feel before they resolve their uncertainty and actually consummate the purchase. A product like a book only has digital attributes in the sense that when I buy Tom's book, there's no surprise when the book shows up. Everything about that book can be efficiently communicated through the online channel. So this is a very, very important distinction. When you think about selling stuff online, diapers.com, there's no surprise if you order Pampers. Pampers come, there's nothing that is going to shock you when they show up. If you buy a banana, if you buy a piece of steak, if you buy a pair of shoes, those things, or a pair of glasses, or buy a bed, they have non-digital attributes. And so there are different things that you have to do to resolve customers' uncertainty. So maybe you do 2 freeway shipping. Maybe you open up a pop-up store. Maybe you use review information in very, very particular ways. So that's the second case study. And the third is Warby Parker. So I guess, Tom and I, when we used to teach basic marketing, you couldn't teach a marketing class at the Wharton School without mentioning conjoint analysis, right? You guys have probably all heard that. Now you can't do a marketing class at Wharton without mentioning Warby Parker, okay? So we'll do a little case study there too. So here's diapers.com. This is what the website looked like. It was founded by Mark Law and Vineet Bara. They were doing about 18,000 orders a day. This is the warehouse, 1.2 million square feet out in western Pennsylvania. And then the key number here is that the whole suite of companies, diapers.com, soap.com, yoyo.com, casa.com, was purchased by Amazon for $545 million. And what's really, really interesting, and one of the reasons why Amazon acquired diapers.com and the other related companies is this little guy here, is the Kiva robot system. So what Mark and Vineet did is essentially built a company with very, very sophisticated logistics, great service and great pricing, and mainly selling replenishable products that have non-digital attributes. Now, one interesting thing to watch is another company I'm going to show you in a second that Mark has started. Again, Michael would be the guy to ask at the break, called Jet.com. And the idea of Jet.com is to put Amazon, I think, isn't it, Michael? Put Amazon out of business. Okay, so I'll say something about Costco. Or Costco, so we'll talk about that later on. A second case study is going to be on Crate and Barrel, and this is going to be focused on a company that began its life offline with traditional stores and then decided to develop some innovation around what it did online. Okay, and Tom mentioned earlier this notion of buy online, pick up in store. I'm going to show you some research on that. And then finally, we're going to talk about Warby Parker. So Warby Parker, interestingly enough, is disrupting the eyewear industry. And actually the term, or the brand name Warby Parker, now is used in the vernacular as a verb. To Warby Parkerize something means to take an industry where the price to the end consumer is this, the cost to manufacture is this, and you build a vertical brand that disrupts that margin. So you could do it in Italian shoes, you could do it in suits, you could do it in eyewear, you could do it in perfume, you could do it in mattresses, and the list goes on and on and on. And so we're seeing many, many companies now being built basically to take advantage of the fact that there's this huge spread in margin that you can disrupt with a vertical brand. So a little bit of statistics. Tom mentioned the bus, so there's a picture of the bus. They've now sold over 1 million pairs of glasses. I think the annual revenue run rate is getting up around $100 million, at least I saw that in the press. And they've recently been named the #1 brand by Fast Company. So the #2 brand was actually a brand Tom mentioned earlier, was Apple. Okay? So Warby Parker has tremendous momentum. This company was started by 4 Wharton alumni in 2010, February, while they were still in school. They graduated in May, so the company has really advanced in leaps and bounds. So anyone here in the room actually wearing any Warby Parker glasses? Okay, there's always at least one. Good. What's your name, sir, please? Max. Okay, great, fantastic. So I may have to come back to you later on for some Q&A. All right. And again, Tom and I felt that we couldn't do this talk with without showing you guys at least one formula. Okay, I mean we are the Wharton School after all. So again, for extra class participation session participation points, who's the fellow on the left with a good head of hair? Isaac Newton, right? And so Isaac Newton is well known for writing down an incredibly important formula, the formula for gravity. Now the fellow on the other side, this would be the Dean's Prize for whatever he's giving out at the lunch break. If you could name the guy on the other side. Any idea? He's less well known, but he's actually very, very important for commerce and for retail. That's William J. Riley, a professor from UCLA, who came up with a formula for retail gravity. Retail gravity. And retail gravity is written down in the following spirit, that all models are wrong, but some are useful. All models are wrong, but some are useful. Retail gravity gives us a way to think about commerce, whether it's online or whether it's offline. And what that little formula means is if we had 2 towns, so town A over here on the left, and there were 100,000 people living in town A, and town B over here on the right, and there were 250,000 people in town B, and you were a shopper, would you rather shop in town A, over here where Dong is, where there's 100,000 people, or would you rather shop in town B, where Max is, where there are 250,000 people? What's a better place to go and buy stuff? B, right? Because it's bigger. So bigger towns, agglomeration, there's more stuff in a bigger town. So you'd rather go to a bigger town. Now let's imagine that those 2 towns were 75 kilometers apart. So as a Kiwi, I'm still in the metric system, so I hope that's okay with you guys. So 75 kilometers apart, the point of indifference between shopping at a town of 250 and a town of 100 is not 37.5 kilometers. It's not the midpoint between the 2 towns, because you'd be willing to travel further to get somewhere that was bigger. So you'd incur more travel costs to end up in a location that offered you more variety. A location that had less variety, you'd be less willing to travel there, so the indifference point is roughly 46 kilometers. So the idea here is, how do you succeed in commerce? You make things big, that means commercially attractive, and you bring them close. Like Amazon one-click, Google Instant Buy, you remove the frictions in the buying process. Those are the 2 things you're doing. So that's the metaphor, and it's also the framework for my book. So basically what I do is I go through each letter of the word gravity, and that's a different chapter of the book. So I'm going to give you now 3 case study examples that illustrate 3 of those letters and 3 of those principles. So we'll start with diapers.com. And then here's the second company. Again, Michael, I keep pointing out over here, is the fellow to ask about Jet.com. Jet.com is getting a lot of press right now This is Mark Law's new venture. And how much has he raised so far, Mike?
200 million.
So he's raised $200 million already before he's actually done anything, okay? But he's Mark Law, so he's very successful with the acquisition previously to Amazon, $545 million. And as I understand it, what he's trying to do is essentially sell stuff that has primarily digital attributes. You know what you're going to get before it shows up. So it's like Tide detergent. And he's going to do that by charging you a membership fee, like you would have if you went to a warehouse club like Costco. And then everything, I think this is right, Michael, that he sends to you, he makes no money on. So he ships it to you at a certain price, and there's a certain shipping cost that he incurs, and his expected profit from that enterprise is zero, but he gets 20 million people paying $50 a year on the membership fee, and I think that's basically how the thing is supposed to work, isn't it? Okay, good. All right, so just again, if you're interested, and actually the other thing that's interesting about this, you know what this guy did? A very, very important thing for an e-commerce company is customer acquisition early on. Because if you're a traditional retailer, the good news is when Tom and I open a wine store selling New Zealand wine in Philadelphia, we know exactly where the customers will come from. Retail gravity tells us that people close to the store will visit. As they get further away, the customers will dissipate. That's the idea of retail gravity. So the good news is we know where the customers are. The bad news is the market's limited. E-commerce is exactly the converse. The market is unlimited. It's the whole United States or the whole world. The bad news is, how does anyone ever find out about something called Jet.com? So what Mark did is he engaged in a pre-promotion campaign that acquired 350,000, roughly, email addresses by offering 100,000 shares in Jet.com for the person who could do the most referral. And here's the interesting twist to the story. A friend of mine who runs a loyalty company out in Los Angeles, another New Zealand guy, somebody came to his company called Swag Bucks, paid $25,000 to have a personal referral program built, and then that guy ended up being the #1 referrer and received 100,000 shares in the company. So, and there was an article that just came out about this. So I was actually joking with one of my colleagues at Wharton. I should actually quit my job. I'm on sabbatical, so I have not that much to do. And I should have gone knocking on doors trying to refer people. I would have got 100,000 shares. As it is, I think I ended up about 3,000, so I get a year of free shipping or something like that. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now, guys, is I'm going to show you some maps, and take this as being, this is diapers.com, this is NetGrocer, this is, something.com selling stuff throughout the United States. And I'm going to show you the evolution of demand, and any area here that you see on the map that's dark is an area where there is a customer has bought something in the first 6 months of operation of, xyz.com. And then you notice after 18 months, you've got a few more customers, and 30 months, and then after roughly 3.5 years, you've got even more customers. So what's interesting here is the e-commerce company is spreading over time and over space, and then the question would be, in month 43, are the new customers going to appear on that map at random? So we get 10,000 new customers, they're just uniformly distributed across the country. Or will there be some special kind of structure? So what do you guys anticipate? It's a bit of a leading question. So will they just be random, or will there be some special kind of structure? Structure, oh, thank you. Okay, thanks, Anubhav. So special structure. So what does the special structure look like? Well, we get a sense of it if we split the east and the west coast of the United States. And what you see is that new customers tend to arrive in locations that are contiguous with locations that already have customers. Okay, now we're just showing the raw data. If you build a statistical model and you control for income, education, access to stores, you still find this effect of contiguity in terms of where new customers show up. And there's two very important principles for that are illustrated by this picture here. So the first principle is the principle of homophily. Birds of a feather flock together. People who live on the mainline suburbs in Philadelphia, on average, are more similar to each other than a fellow from the mainline suburbs of Philadelphia and somebody else who's living in Iowa City. This is something that's known as, those of you who studied real estate at the Wharton School, Tebow sorting. People sort into neighborhoods on the basis of the costs and benefits of the services that neighborhood offers, and also their preferences for living next to people who look and have tastes that are similar to them. So if you can find one customer in a certain location, you can surely find a second one because of the principle of homophily. The second principle that's supposed to be illustrated by this little picture here is that people who are co-located tend to share information either explicitly or implicitly. So if I'm, living next door to Tom, and Tom and I both have, young kids, and he's using diapers.com. He may tell me about it. Now, what's powerful about that is that if Tom has young kids, and I also have young kids, and we're living in the same neighborhood, if diapers.com is attractive to him because it's so far to go to the store, it will certainly be attractive to me because I'm literally living in the same location. So because of homophily, because of contagion, you always see this contiguity effect of demand in e-commerce. Okay, the next case study we're going to look at here is Crate and Barrel. I've just listed some of the other companies, as Tom did earlier, that are engaged in this. This is the practice of buy online, pick up in store. Okay, buy online, pick up in store. And like many of the traditional retailers on that slide, they were finding, initially at least, that their .com operation was not particularly successful. Crateandbarrel.com, Target.com, Walmart.com, not necessarily doing so well. So in order to boost sales at crateandbarrel.com, this is what these guys did. So in certain areas of the United States, if you went to the Crate and Barrel website, what you would observe on that website is you would get price and inventory information about the products that crateandbarrel.com was selling. Okay, so Yannicka could go onto the website. She could see that there's a coffee machine that's being sold at crateandbarrel.com. There are 3 of them in stock, and it's $200. So price and inventory transparency. And the thesis was, in locations where Yannicka could go on and see that information and then buy the product at crateandbarrel.com and go to the store and pick it up, that crateandbarrel.com sales in those locations should be higher than in locations where Ziv is doing his shopping. He goes to crateandbarrel.com and he doesn't have that option. Okay, does that make sense to you guys? So in some locations, information is provided, price and inventory. In other locations, it's not. And the thesis was, in these locations, sales at crateandbarrel.com should therefore be increased by the provision of this information. Now, what was the result, and Tom alluded to this earlier, is that when you switch on this price and inventory information, sales at crateandbarrel.com do not go up. In fact, they go down. And when people are on the crateandbarrel.com website in those locations, they're more likely to put stuff into the cart, but then not actually consummate the deal. Because it sort of looks like bad news. You've given more transparency into what you're offering, what the prices are and how much inventory is there, and now you start selling less. But as Tom kind of alluded to before, what might in fact happen is that Yannicka sees that it's there, it's only $200, but because it's a coffee machine or a bed or a piece of furniture or some plates that have what kind of attributes? As non-digital, right? It's a tactile component. Because there's a tactile component, before she pulls the trigger and buys it, she wants to smell the coffee, touch the bed, try on the robe, look at the plates. And so for that reason, sales at Crate and Barrel stores in those locations go up. Again, as Tom alluded to, the store traffic goes up even more. And then sales of other things, she was focused on the coffee machine, sales of other stuff go up about 5%. I didn't put that on the slide because I ran out of space, okay? But that's an important result. Okay, and this particular study was done by two of my co-authors and colleagues, graduates from the Open department, who now teach at Tuck and Kellogg. Okay, now, so what's this supposed to illustrate? This is about the second principle that I talk about in the book, the principle of resistance. Eliminating resistance, removing frictions in the buying process. So most of us in the room have used TripAdvisor. Okay, TripAdvisor is a $10 billion plus public company. And all it does is provide information that eliminates some of the friction in the buying process. Before you come and stay at the Shangri-La Hotel, you could go to TripAdvisor and you could see, in fact, if the services were that good, what were the ratings, and so on. ZocDoc, a company that provides ratings for doctors, also has Wharton alumni involved, is a $1.6 billion public company. Jack Abram, as an undergrad student at the Wharton School, started something called Milo.com, where he put price and inventory information into an app or onto a website. I want to buy a TV. I put in the number of the TV. I can see all the stores in Philly that have it, how far away they are, and what the prices are. eBay came along and they wrote Jack a check for $75 million. But all he did was make information available. The important point here is anything you do to reduce resistance, to eliminate friction in the buying process will be incredibly valuable. There's a company that's doing very, very well in New York right now, and it's applying the Warby Parker model to a product that you normally pay this, it costs this, and there's a kind of a terrible buying experience. And it's a product that most of us, we should use at least 8 hours a day. Some of us use it less, but what's that product? It's a mattress. Mattresses are marked up about 300%. Mattresses are very, very important for getting good sleep. So there's a company that came along, it's called Casper, like Casper the Ghost. One of the funders is one of our alumni, Ben Lehrer, who also started Thrill List. And Casper.com will send you a bed for $1,000, roughly $900, in a very beautiful big blue box. That's about creating social exposure. So for e-commerce, the packaging is really important because people might see it. They might unbox it and make a video of it. So Casper.com will send you a bed for $1,000. But before you buy a bed, what might you like to do? You might like to sleep on it or sit on it because a bed has what kind of attributes? Non-digital attributes, right? So if you're selling beds online, it's going to be very, very inefficient to do the Zappos thing and do free two-way shipping of a bed. I mean, maybe you could do a pop-up store where people could come into, Center City, Philadelphia. They lie down on a bed that you've set up in the middle of Rittenhouse Square or something like that. That might be difficult too. So you know what Casper.com does? They use the process of reviews to eliminate friction, and they do it in a very clever way. When you go to the Casper.com website, you can see a review, but it's not just a written review of, Tom liked the bed and he gave it 5 stars. What you see at the top of the review are 3 other pieces of information. Here's Tom from Manhattan. He's a side sleeper. He sleeps 9 hours a day, and he sleeps with Diana, okay? I had to, I looked, and a cat. So that's literally how it's, I'm a stomach sleeper. I sleep 5 hours a day, sleeps with a partner and a dog. I mean, that's what the website looks. And what are they doing? They're allowing you to go through the website and to find the person who looks sort of like your clone. And if they found the bed to be acceptable, then you might also do that. Okay, so this idea of eliminating resistance and friction can kind of show up in some interesting ways. Now, again, since we're among friends here, I was showing this example in my class, my e-commerce class the other day. And sometimes Tom and I have this experience. If you don't check stuff, before you show it to the class, like sometimes it'd be a problem. So I pull up the website and I click on some random guy. It's Joe from Austin, Texas, but he'd filled in sleeps with multiple partners. on the site. It was, some 19-year-old kid, I guess, was having a bit of fun. Okay. All right, so let's do Warby Parker. All right, so Warby Parker, again, as many of you in the room know, started by 4 of our alum from the Wharton School, now a very, very prominent company, not just an e-commerce company, but as Tom indicated, a true online, offline, omni-channel company, selling eyewear for $95. Now, when these guys first started the business, they had 2 ways that you could buy glasses. So they actually did this when they were still in school, so February 2010. So if you wanted to, you could go online and you could buy a pair of glasses, and what you could do is you could upload a picture of your face, so you'd use this virtual try-on and take a look at what they look like, and if you like the glasses, you could pull the trigger and buy. Now again, because eyewear has, what kind of attributes? Has non-digital attributes. People like to try them on. They recognize this alone may be insufficient. Okay, now I have to ask Max, how did you buy yours, Max? Online, good. So good. Well, you're a Wharton. You're a very confident guy. You're a Wharton guy. You've got no problem with just going online and pulling the trigger. But some of us might feel, you know what? I just can't do that. I need to touch the product. I need to get the opinion of my wife. I need to talk to my friends. And so they implemented this thing called the Home Try-On program, where they would send you 5 frames for 5 days for free. You try them out and send them back, because that's a way to get around the non-digital attribute problem. Then, at a certain point, they added a 3rd channel, and Tom showed you some pictures of this. They started to introduce showrooms. Okay? Now, a showroom, you could go in and you could try on all of the stuff that they make. Now, this is a little bit of, this is not quite truth in advertising. What I'm showing you here is actually the Soho store. It's a beautiful store. Has anyone been into the store in downtown Manhattan? Okay, if you're in New York, you should go and check it out. It was actually built with consultation of the fellow who did all the Apple stores. You can see some really nice detail there of kind of old ladders and stuff that looks like a library. So the brand name itself, just in case you don't know, there's a reason why this company is not called $95glasses.com, right? Because products have functional, emotional, and symbolic benefits that you have to convey through the brand. So Warby Parker is the first name and the last name of 2 characters from an unpublished novel by an iconic American author called Jack Kerouac. Because when you think about authors and reading and writing and being intellectual, and going into a library, you can start to tell a narrative around eyewear that's much, much more interesting than the functional benefit of having a low price. Okay, so anyway, this is the store. You can actually take some stuff away from this store, but mostly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a showroom, I'm talking about in Philadelphia in a store called Art in the Age in Old City that many of you may fondly remember. You can go in and you can try on the glasses, but you cannot complete the purchase. This is what Tom was talking about earlier with the pop-up. You see the product, but you can't take it away. You buy it online. So you get the information offline, but fulfillment still happens online. So the question we asked, and this is where I'll wrap up this case study, is what was the impact for Warby Parker when they drop a showroom into a location? So let's imagine in your location, in Diana's location over here with you guys, you could buy glasses this way or this way, and then we decided to open a showroom in Diana's location. Okay? Now, in the other location over here, in Tom's location, there's traditional, you can buy them online or home try them, but you have no showroom. And the question is, in a location that has a showroom versus one that doesn't, is there a difference in sales? Or is there a difference in demand and other kinds of things? Now, again, when the CEOs of the company, when they open showrooms, do you think that they just sort of, here's a map of the US, boom, let's open one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Boom, Albuquerque, New Mexico. So normally when you analyze an experiment, the treatment should be assigned at random. Now in this case, clearly stores are not opened at random. They're opened in locations where people think the stores are going to do well, so we have to adjust that out of the analysis. And what do we find? When you open a showroom, in locations that have showrooms relative to those that don't, demand is about 9% higher. You might say, well, that's probably to be expected because you have 3 channels here and only 2 here. What's maybe more interesting, again, Tom was alluding to this earlier, is in locations where you have a physical presence, sales at warbyparker.com go up because there's something about the legitimacy and the brand building of the physical presence. And then, interestingly enough, in locations where you open a showroom, that second channel of home try-on sales in that location actually, sales through that channel actually go down. So that looks like bad news until you figure out that actually, even though the sales in these locations went down 5%, the orders went down by 8%. So if sales dropped by 5 and orders dropped even more by 8, that means the conversion on that channel actually improved. So by opening a physical store, what you're doing is you're creating a better match between, Max is fine with online, Tom really is totally okay doing home try-on, but let's say, Diana would really like to try on 20 or 30 or 40 pairs, so she really needs the showroom. So the people so Diana previously would have been in with Tom doing home try-on when those were the only 2 options, because she's not going to do it online. When you give her the third one, she goes in there, therefore the people who get left in the second option have a better match to that channel, and so you get more operational efficiency, there's less repeating of that, and there's less web returns. Okay? This is all about topography, the idea of this integrated online and offline environment where you're doing activities in both. And again, this is a bit of fun. Some of you might have seen this before. This is the New York Public Library. This is September 2011, before Warby Parker really had a lot of momentum and a lot of funding. And you notice that all of these people are wearing eyewear. So which eyewear do you think they're wearing? It's Warby Parker. And furthermore, this lady here who's reading a book, because she's in a library, on the outside of the book is something that says Begley, same as this fellow here. Well, it turns out this is the name of the frame style that the people are wearing. Okay? So what's the point of me showing you this? Well, what Warby Parker did is they did something that was brand consistent in a physical location that didn't cost them much money, but then was amplified through the online world and through social media and traditional media that got them a lot of PR and a lot of press. So again, this, tying back to what Tom said earlier, what you're doing oftentimes in the real world is creating these visceral events and experiences that then can be amplified through the online or the virtual channel.